The next bill we'll be hearing today is House File 1510. This is my bill, but members, per the agenda posting, we're going to be combining several Department of Public Safety policy bills into the delete all amendment. And this is an agency, this is a series of bills by the agency, so I'm going to stay up here while the commissioner and agency staff present the bill. But first, I will move that House File 1510 be recommended to be placed on the general register. And then I will move the DE2 amendment. And we do have nonpartisan staff that's going to walk us through this amendment, and I'll call on Mr. Diebel to do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. The DE2 amendment begins with Section 1. It's a piece from Representative Kern's House File 1648, and it updates a reference from the Department of Corrections, excuse me, to the Department of Public Safety to reflect current responsibility for this program. Section 2 is a Representative Moeller bill, the underlined 1510, and it allows the Commissioner of Public Safety to accept donations and transfers from non-governmental sources. Sections 3 through 8 of the proposal are from Representative Hewitt's House File 1759, and these make a variety of changes to the emergency management, bomb squad definitions, and responding to bomb and bomb sweeps and allows for agencies to bill the cost of bomb sweeps to event organizers who request those services. Jumping forward to Section 9, this is the questioned identity process from Representative Kern's House File 1524, and it provides a process for those who believe that their identity is linked to erroneous information in the BCA's databases to correct those records. Sections 10 through 12 of the DE2 are from Representative Kern's House File 1777, and they relate to the Juvenile Justice Advisory Group and adds duties for the group, and it includes advising the superintendent on emerging technology, privacy interests, and other bureau initiatives. And then it contains some conforming changes as well. The final section that I'll cover in the DE2 is Section 13. This is also a piece from Representative Hewitt's House File 1759, and relates to smoke detectors and clarifying that they are should be referred to as smoke alarms in statute. And I'd ask that you recognize Mr. Johnson to continue with the overview.
Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, members, Sections 14 and 15 are both from House File 2205. These amend the computer theft statute to clearly apply to unauthorized copying of electronic data, even when the act does not prevent the rightful owner from accessing or possessing that data. Sections 16 and 17 are from Representative Duran's House File 1647. These require prosecutors to make reasonable efforts to notify victims of the date and time of a sentencing hearing and a hearing at which a plea will be presented, and also make a technical change to clarify that it's the prosecutors and not the courts that have responsibility for giving that notification. The next group of sections, which are sections 18 all the way through section 35 and also include section 39, are all from Representative Holland's House File 1713. These replace the term reparations with reimbursement in those sections that address the reimbursement of crime victims. Section 22 specifically also clarifies that cooperation with law enforcement can be documented through law enforcement records, prosecution records, and certifications from victim services groups. Moving to Section 36, Sections 36 through 38, and also Section 40 clarify that the Office of Justice Programs and not the Department of Corrections is the designated agency responsible for domestic abuse funding. These are from Representative Curran's House File 1648. Madam Chair, that is all the sections in the DE.
All right, thank you for that excellent walkthrough. And We do have a couple of amendments to the DE2. The first one I will move, it's the A2 amendment, and it's just making a technical change where there was some language that needed to be updated that we missed the first time. All those in favor of, well, first, any discussion on the A2 amendment? All those in favor of the A2 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails. The A2 amendment is adopted. The next amendment we have is the A3. Who will be offering the A3 amendment?
That'll be me, Chair Moeller.
Representative Novotny to the A3.
Thank you, Chair Moeller. A3 is an amendment that is just adding some language that would restrict the donation of monies with strings attached. They cited in some of these working groups in the Deadly Encounters Working Group that Department of Public Safety was not able to accept gifts. This amendment still allows people to make donations to the Department of Public Safety, but it does not allow the gift giver to put conditions on the gift. For example, if Elon Musk wants to give the Minnesota State Patrol $100 million, but as a requirement of the gift, the State Patrol must replace all the cars with electric vehicles, that would be prohibited. This amendment still allows the gift giver to designate the division or programs where he or she wants the money to go. There just can't be strings attached to the donation that the Department of Public Safety has to change policy or practice. From a practical standpoint, my first cop job was at the city of Princeton, and for those of you older than I am, the controversy at the city of Princeton was a young individual came to the Princeton City Council with literally a bag full of money. And yes, Representative Hewitt's old enough to remember. He came literally with a bag full of money and gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to the city of Princeton. They bought squad cars, and in exchange, he wanted access to the record systems. So I came in after that, but lived with the after effects of someone and seeing the damage that donations with strings attached can do to a community. So that is my feelings about this bill, and I hope you accept it as a friendly amendment.
Thank you. It's my understanding that I can certainly understand the intent of where you're going with this. It's my understanding that this would actually, though, however, make it harder for them to get grants, which was what they wanted to do as a result of that Deadly Force Encounters Working Group. And I know that the commissioner is here to perhaps speak a little bit more on that. So I will ask for your comment on this, Commissioner Jacobson.
Thank you, Chair Moeller. Members of the committee, again, Bob Jacobson, Commissioner of Public Safety for the state of Minnesota. It's my honor to be here. The Department of Public Safety would be opposed to that amendment. We believe that many of the grants that we would be able to obtain would not necessarily have a specific purpose, but would be asking for some kind of an outcome out of that process. For instance, the Deadly Encounters Working Group, as I understand it, if we've been able to receive funds, again, recommendations would come out of that working group. There would be actions that would be requested, and to put some limits on use of those grant funds would certainly make it more difficult for us to be able to get to the work done and to be able to follow up on recommendations or actions made by any one of those working groups.
Further discussion on the A3. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Schnell,
Commissioner Jacobson.
oh, Jacobson, sorry.
Schnell's been here a lot lately, though,
Yes,
so I can
yes.
understand that.
My apologies. Commissioner Jacobson, when you talk about grant funding received for a particular purpose, are you referring to grants administered by the state or grants that you're receiving from private entities?
Commissioner Jacobson.
Thank you, Chair Moeller, Representative Hudson. Typically, the grants that we would expect to receive would be from nonprofit groups or outside organizations. Again, is to use the example of the Deadly Force Encounters Work Group, organizations that want to see an outcome from this, some actions that come out of a working group, and so that would be the typical organizations that we would get funds from.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess a question for either Chair Moeller or Commissioner Jacobson would be, do you see a path beyond this language, which you've expressed opposition to try to affect prohibiting outside organizations from having a impact upon the policy of the Department of Public Safety that has not been deliberated by elected officials?
I don't know if you want to answer this, Commissioner Jacobson, but I'll just say, like, I'm certainly willing to work on language. I completely understand the intent of what this amendment is doing. I just think the language is too limiting, but I'm always open to suggestions on language. And although this is an agency bill, it is our bill now in the legislature. So I'm always willing to work on that. Anything further?
Just that I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else, Representative Novotny, to your amendment?
Representative Hudson beat me to the punch there. I'll withdraw the amendment and hope that we can work on this and make it clear and acceptable.
All right, with that, the A3 amendment is withdrawn. So now we will move on to a vote to the underlying DE2 amendment as amended. Those in favor of the DE2 amendment as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails. The DE2 amendment as amended is adopted. Okay, now we can move on to the official bill presentation. And I believe, Commissioner, that you will be speaking first to the bill. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Moeller, again, members of the committee, again, Bob Jacobson, Commissioner of Public Safety. I will just speak briefly about the acceptance of private funds, those appropriations, cover that bill, and then stand for questions, and then I will pass it on to Superintendent Evans and to other members of the Department of Public Safety. Again, DPS is, we are requesting a fairly straightforward bill that we may be able to accept donations on federal grants, bequests, other gifts of money to carry out the purposes of Chapter 299A, which again talks about the powers and duties of public safety. We think that being able to accept those grant funds from interested organizations can help us better follow our mission, be able to bring stakeholders and other local nonprofits and foundations to the table. And we think it's an important issue to communities, especially as it revolves around safety or other issues that we can work through. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Superintendent Drew Evans. Welcome back to the committee. Introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Moeller and members of the committee. My name is Drew Evans. I'm the superintendent at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. I will be talking about beginning at Section 9, which is on line 6.20. This first portion is a policy proposal that we have proposed that would deal with our question identity process. Individuals across Minnesota often their identity is used and their identity gets put oftentimes on a criminal history when their name is used as an alias. An example would be that two siblings and one sibling is the one that gets in trouble on a regular basis and the other doesn't, but they've used their sibling's alias on that. It gets put on their criminal history. What this bill would do is it would allow us to codify our current practice, which is involved for many years at the BCA, but the individual requests review by the BCA. They would provide us with photo identification. They provide documentation or information that shows they are the subject of question identity. The BCA takes fingerprints for verification to show that they are not the individual in the alias that's listed. If confirmed, we provide them with a letter from the BCA indicating they are subject of question identity. And then we denote any aliases on the state criminal history system and work with local agencies to denote those alias and arrest warrants so that process has been in place. Part of the process in the request here is to codify this in statute so it's more clear to citizens as they're trying to examine how to address this process. But the second piece of this is that we currently cannot remove an alias from a criminal history record without a statutory authority due to FBI rules. So the expansion we would do with this is we would add photographs to related arrest warrants that we would add in so that there's a photograph as law enforcement is pulling up the warrant so they can see the individual that's the subject of the actual special warrant. We would also be authorized to remove an alias from criminal history record in consultation with our local criminal justice agencies that may be impacted. We would be able to do this then if it didn't negatively impact any future cases that would be going forward after a period of time, and so that would give us the mechanism to remove that alias from the criminal history of an individual when it's appropriate. And there's a number of factors that would go into place as we're examining that. And Chair, would you like me to pause each section for questions, or would you like me to move through the BCA proposals?
Why don't you finish moving through yours, and then before we move on to the other testifiers, we'll stop and do questions for both of you on the parts you've covered already. Go ahead.
Sounds good. Chair Mulder, the second section is section 10 pertaining to the BCA, beginning at line 7.26. This is a expansion of a current advisory board that we have in process right now. This advisory board at the BCA is called the Criminal Justice, or I'm sorry, I'm backing up. The first portion of this proposal is to expand the use of the criminal justice data network. We have a criminal justice data network that our law enforcement partners and other criminal justice partners utilize that's a secure network across the state of Minnesota. A few years back, we cleaned up the statutory language related to this data network to make it clear what could be used. There was an unintentional consequence as we were doing that, and the language that we passed, that currently it prohibits transmission of video across the criminal justice data network. As body cams have come online, and that law enforcement are using different networks to store that information, it has required them to bifurcate transmitting video across that. In other words, using a different network and the criminal justice data network. We can handle the volume on the criminal justice data network from a transmission perspective, and so this would be, the first part of this would be allowing the use of that to coincide with the current advances in technology and how that network should be used. The second portion of this is expanding the role of the Criminal Justice and Juvenile Information Advisory Group to add an BCA advisory group. It's a long term, but that group is currently a meeting and in statute, and they felt it was important as we consulted with them to remain that portion of the name, and they examined the uses of our criminal justice systems across Minnesota, integration, all different ways to look at criminal justice information sharing. That group is already in statute and represents a broad swath of stakeholders, and so as we were examining policy proposals related to this, we felt that there was room to provide further advice to the BCA on different policy proposals, whether it's a change in our evidence acceptance policies, whether it's an audit that we're doing, whether or not it's an emerging technology issue that we should be looking at. This would expand the role of that advisory group that's already codified and represents that broad stakeholder group, to be able to take a look at some of those different issues from, like I mentioned, from audits to all types of different things that we could look at, maintaining the current structure that's already in statute, to provide better advice to us to meet the needs of Minnesotans and our stakeholders and our law enforcement partners across Minnesota. The next item for the BCA will be on, forgive me as I page through, will be on section 15, which is the computer or electronic data theft. This arose in a case that we were investigating with one of our cyber intrusion cases that was a theft. It wasn't a theft, ultimately. That's why the policy proposal is here. But it was an individual that purposely hacked in to a school district database that housed the information for parents and their credit card information for the school lunch program. The individual copied it. They didn't take it. They downloaded it. They took a copy of that, but they did not actually use it for identity theft purposes or use the data in a way that actually resulted in an actual loss. And so the suggestion in this case would be that that individual, we shouldn't wait until an actual nefarious use of that data is used, that there was an intentionality in that process to take that, hold that would be able to be held criminally accountable. There's a analogous statute that covers this at the federal level, but due to thresholds that often are not met in that case, this would create a similar process so that we could prosecute an individual who does that with intentionality at the state level. And then I think that covers the BCA's portions, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll pause right here for the sections that you both have covered already to see if there are any member questions to those sections. Representative Whitney.
Thank you, Chair Moeller. Thank you for the additions to identity theft. that is a big problem for the person whose identity has been used, and especially when they're out on a traffic stop. So I think those pieces are going to be very helpful. So thank you for making those changes.
Further discussion? All right, moving right along then. We have Kate Weeks and then Jim Smith. Executive Director Weeks, welcome back to the committee. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate Weeks. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Justice Programs with the Department of Public Safety. First, I'd like to just touch briefly on the provisions. It's an OJP technical fix found in House File 1648. This proposal corrects several instances of outdated and inconsistent statutory language related to OJP statutory responsibilities that were not corrected when Crime Victim Services moved from the Department of Corrections over to the Department of Public Safety in 2003. The language amends state statute to reflect that OJP has the responsibility to designate programs providing services to victims of domestic abuse. In addition, it removes outdated language referring to an expired report requirement. The second provision related to OJP streamlines victim notification requirements and were found in House File 1647. Currently, crime victims have rights under the Minnesota Crime Victim Bill of Rights in Chapter 611A. Under this chapter, prosecutors may have many responsibilities towards victims with regard to providing information about the case and notification of important events during the prosecution period. This proposal provides clear direction on the responsibility to notify victims of plea and sentencing hearings, making sure that victims get notice of these hearings. In addition, to ensure that victims know about sentencing modifications, the proposal shifts the notification responsibility also to prosecutors. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Oftentimes, courts do not have victim information, so this proposal better ensures that victims will be notified. Prosecutors often have this victim notification and provide information regularly already. This proposal makes the practice uniform across the state. The third provision under the Office of Justice Programs relates to the Crime Victim Reparations Program, and those changes are found in House File 1713 and mentioned throughout the DE amendment. The first piece replaces the word reparations with the word reimbursement throughout Section 611A. This is the statutory provision that authorizes the Crime Victim Reparations Program, which outlines eligibility requirements and establishes the board and process. The name change aligns Minnesota with the majority of other states, and it makes it clear that this is a reimbursement program. The second provision allows the program to rely on information from prosecutors and other professionals familiar with the case to establish cooperation with law enforcement officials. A provision of 611A requires that no reparations must be awarded to a claimant otherwise eligible if the victim or claimant failed or refused to cooperate fully with police or other law enforcement officials. This provision a proposal provides that claimants or victims may provide additional statements from providers or advocates associated with the victim and incident to show that the victim did attempt to cooperate with law enforcement officials. This proposal does not negate law enforcement's determination in these cases. It just affirmatively allows other information to be included in the record for consideration by staff and the board. The third proposal that the third piece that is included in this proposal would prohibit a determination of contributory misconduct based on the person's current or past affiliation with a particular group. Currently, an applicant faces a denial or reduction of their claim if there is determination of contributory misconduct. This proposal maintains that if someone contributes or maintains that contributory misconduct will result in a reduction or denial, meaning if someone caused the harm or caused something that led to their harm, they would not benefit from Minnesota's Crime Victim Reparations Program. However, there are no consistent, comprehensive ways to make these determinations, and we are asking that we remove the ability for someone to make an assumption about a person. And so we are asking for that piece to be removed, that you cannot make an assumption based on a person's past affiliation, because there is not a concrete way to make that determination. But we would like to maintain that contributory misconduct would prevent someone from being able to participate in this program. And I stand open for questions.
All right, yeah, we'll go ahead and pause for questions here. It was a lot. Anybody? Y'all are quiet today. It's okay. I'm not asking for more. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Chair Moeller. I'm wondering, is this in competition with a victim reimbursement process that is already in existence in public policy that's managed by the state and doesn't involve nonprofit groups?
Director Weeks.
Chair Moeller, Representative. So the Office of Justice Programs operates Minnesota's crime victim reparations program for the entire state. We work directly with claimants and victims, not nonprofit agencies. And so this program isn't in conflict with another program that would be run by nonprofits. The only way that nonprofits are involved in this process is oftentimes victims will seek services, and an advocate at that nonprofit may help fill out the form, because sometimes if someone is in trauma or they're in crisis, sometimes it's hard to sit and fill something out, so they often work with victims with that process. But that victim or claimant then submits that information to us, and we work directly with the victims and families.
Anything further?
No, thank you for the clarification.
Anything else? All right. Thank you. Next up, we have the State Fire Marshal, Jim Smith. Welcome, and please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Moeller. For the record, my name is Jim Smith, and I am the State Fire Marshal for the state of Minnesota. Before you in your packet, you will see that the Fire Marshal Division has recommended some changes to language specific to primarily the 299A part of the statutes. The state assets that I'll be referring to today are our hazardous material response teams, which we have 11 of. We also have 4 bomb squads and 2 urban search and rescue teams and 1 air rescue team. Since the State Fire Marshal oversees the operations of these 4 unique emergency response assets, it's important to rename the Minnesota Hazardous Material Incident Response Act to the Minnesota Emergency Incident Response Act, which would include then all assets that are under the oversight of the State Fire Marshal Division, all state teams. Current statute does not acknowledge the urban search and rescue teams, bomb squads, and air rescue teams. Because of this omission, it makes it extremely difficult to fully reimburse all state assets for specific emergency responses, invoicing responsible parties for scheduled activities, and also providing funding and or reimbursement for non-reimbursable responses. For an example, national security events such as a dignitary coming into the state to visit, we are required to have a state hazardous material team and a bomb squad shadow that dignitary as they move through the state. Surprisingly enough, the federal government doesn't reimburse us for those activities. And so we, by including the language that you see before you, it would make it possible that we would be able to reimburse the teams for their response. The State Fire Marshal Division is also recommending to remove the 2 terms chemical assessment team and emergency response team. These designations do not align with the federal standards in referencing to typing a response team. The federal government types emergency response teams, type 1 through type 5, sometimes up to type 6. Type 1 being the most robust in equipment and staffing. Excuse me, I'm dealing with a cold. Excuse me.
I can relate.
On the end of it. And type, as the numbers grow bigger in typing, the size and scope of responsibilities decreases. And that is the model that we would like to move toward. It'll help with future grant funding, and we need to remove the chemical assessment team and emergency response team monikers just so we can align with the federal government. A study conducted by MAD a number of years ago was completed, and it was determined that the current statute that states up to 5 regional teams, we need to remove that because depending upon resources throughout the state, we're not sure if 5 is the correct number. We may, through the typing model, add a couple more teams, maybe a type 4 or something like that throughout the state, so the team numbers would probably exceed 5. So we would like to have that flexibility to place these state assets where they can most benefit the citizens of Minnesota. Moving down, the current term of responsible person, or it's hopefully be changed to party, allows the commissioner to invoice for costs where there is an identified party. This new language will allow all state teams to utilize this reimbursement model when applicable. This recommendation also includes new language that will allow DPS to invoice for non-emergency responses, which are occasionally requested by third parties. We do have a number of events throughout the year where specifically our bomb squads are asked to come and do an explosive sweeps. We have no method of invoicing those third parties for the services rendered, and that's had to come out of contractor compensation. We believe that should they request those services, we should be able to invoice for those services. This would not include any emergency response such as we had a year ago down to Lakeville South, where the bomb squad responded to a sweep of the school due to a bomb scare. We're not going to invoice the school district for that response. That's an emergency response as opposed to a planned event. Lastly, the Fire Marshal Division recommends changing the language of the non-responsible party fund to better illustrate what it is used for. Also, you will note that the appropriation recommendation has the funding or residual funding moving back to the general fund. Historically, the non-responsible party fund has been funded through the fire safety account. Due to the language change that we're proposing and including more teams, there needs to be a more robust non-responsible party fund. And in the governor's bill, you will note that there is an ask of $750,000 out of the general fund. So we thought it appropriate that we make sure that the residual funds from that, the general fund, go back to the general fund. Lastly, if you refer to section 13 regarding smoke detectors, historically Minnesota statute has generally used the term smoke detector to capture all styles of devices that either detect or alarm occupants of smoke. Modern fire protection terminology differentiates between smoke alarm and smoke detector. Smoke alarms are the devices found most commonly in your homes and residential buildings, hotels, motels, and by code they are to be there to alert the occupants. Smoke detectors are devices that are connected to a centralized fire alarm system. They are also mandated by code in certain situations, but the Minnesota State Fire Code does differentiate between the two. By changing the language in the statute to refer to these devices as smoke alarms, it'll align with the language currently in the Minnesota State Fire Code. With that, I stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the fire marshal? All right, I'm not seeing any. Thank you.
Thank you.
And those, that was all that we had for testifiers, and nobody from the public signed up to testify on this bill. So do we have any other further member questions or discussion? All right, I'm not seeing any. So I will renew my motion that House File 1510 as amended be recommended to be placed on the general register. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails. Thanks again for all of you for being here today. We appreciate it. And just to be clear, so that people aren't confused with what was posted online, so those individual bills, 1524, 1648, 1647, 1713, 1777, 1759, and 2205, will not be acting on those individual bills.